Hey everybody, welcome back to Amar City. In today's episode we're gonna work on the central station of the city, improve some of the infrastructure and public transport so that it'll work for the future growth as well, get back to some of the older areas and do a lot more detailing, especially on the foliage side and on these plazas and streets, and as a whole hopefully finish the entire island of what is going to be the center, the real core of the city, so that we can move on to the other islands and really get the shape out there. So without further ado, let's get started with the time-lapse. Now the first thing that I wanted to tackle is this very open space in front of the central station. I haven't really tackled it in a video before, but I did try a couple of ways to make it look less dead, more inviting and more like it actually breathes some life into the city. The only problem was that none of the plans really ended up looking that good. Like, I figured a park could work quite well, but I wanted this to be open so that the sight lines from both sides, from like the waterfront onto the station, but also from the station onto the waterfront, are still open. And I didn't want to fill it with nothing, since if I did that, it would just become this very wide open space in which you can't really do anything. And in the end, I settled with a sort of in-between option, putting a bunch of planters around the edges, just to breathe some life into it, make it a bit more green and a bit more of a nice place to stay. And putting some benches, some kiosks and grill restaurants. Kind of stuff that you would see around here. I'm not sure if you would really see it in front of a station in the golf area. But it's what I figured would be the best option to keep this spot quite open and really keep it as a plaza without it becoming a very open, desolate sort of plaza where you don't really want to stay. Besides, it's the golf area anyway, and in the summer it's gonna be pretty hot down there, so I didn't want to make it like the central life of the entire city either. Anyway, that's just sort of the safe in-between option. Now the other thing that I wanted to do is actually put some details onto these buildings. I didn't really do it that much. I played around with the idea a little bit in the last episode, but this is actually what I think is one of these game-changing things that newest mods have brought into the game, and I know many people have talked about this. Almost every week you get some videos and tweets from people like Fluxtron, Strict Toaster and Fresh Popcorn saying that the newest mod this week is already game-changing as well, and I feel the same about the prop snapping mod, which you can actually snap props to buildings. The thing is, from the game itself, you'd have to spend a lot of time to get into the asset editor and give a building another function. And with this kind of option, you can actually make a residential building that you want to have as, for instance, an office building look like an office by putting these billboards and putting all of these decorations onto them that sort of shift their function into another thing from what they're originally meant to be. And especially with these buildings, since this is the main street of the city, I wanted these buildings to look quite lively and put a lot of billboards on them. This is definitely going to be the most valuable space of the city when it comes to advertising and having restaurants and having shops. So I wanted to make sure to use the props to kind of make the buildings look like they have that kind of function as well. And so far I'm actually quite happy with that kind of thing. Like, many of the in-game office buildings actually work quite well to actually turn them into shop-looking buildings or restaurant-looking buildings, and I think that's a lot of not just fun to play around with, but can actually be quite a game changer as well. The same goes for putting props on buildings that don't have any air vents or don't have any pipelines going across the roof. You can just add some extra detailing in places where you couldn't really do that earlier. Now the next thing that I wanted to do is actually tackle some of the transport of this station. There's one thing that I didn't have yet, and that is a place where the taxis can go. I will still have taxis. I don't believe that any kind of city can be sustainable at this point without having cars and without having taxis, so I did still want to keep it quite similar to any other station in that sense. But what I did quickly want to do is remove that road that went underneath the station, not just because it kind of clipped into the station, but also because it could provide a way to cut off like the enormous road that goes around the center of the city, and just possibly save some time with that. So I wanted to cut that off and pretty much force cars to go around the city center instead of straight through it. And also that opens up a pretty good space over here to add up a taxi place, so that's what we're going for here. Basically, they can come out from underneath the train tracks and drive into this little plaza over here where some of the waiting spots are, along with a bunch of foliage and planters to make it look like a bit more of a nice area to stay. And also we're gonna have the bicycle shelter over here. Now I was thinking about this for quite a while, because obviously I wanted to promote like alternative ways of transport outside of cars in the city, but the temperature in the Gulf area is something that I should keep in mind as well, and given the fact that it's so darn hot in the summer, I didn't really want to put too much focus into cycling and instead make it more possible to walk through the city, but I still wanted to have some sort of way to get your way to the station on a bike. So there are the biking shelters. Do you call them biking shelters? Anyway, the biking parking spots underneath the train tracks, and a couple of them outside as well, right next to the taxi place and right next to the station and bus station as well. So that's that. That is pretty much the basic layout of the new area that we have here. And that pretty much also opens up a lot of time to add all of the detailing and work with that for quite a while, which was a lot of fun actually, but it's what we're gonna spend the next couple of minutes on, adding all of these different planters and bollards, I think that's how you pronounce it, around the roadside here, and putting in all of the textures for the paths to make it look a bit nicer, have some color in there, and especially a lot of planters and very small parks around this area. Since there aren't really that many buildings and a lot of this place is like intertwining train tracks and roads and bus routes, then I wanted to have the remaining area to be open for pedestrians and make a nice place to walk around in. Also, we're gonna have a shopping center on the corner of the paths over here, right in this big rectangle that is currently still sandy, but that's something that I'm gonna get to in the very near future. First, I wanted to very quickly add in all of the details around this area, kind of see what it's going to look like before I fill it in with the shopping center and make the entire area come together. Now, something that I also thought was pretty interesting and something that I wanted to do throughout this city, which I didn't really talk about yet so far, is well, really the way that I'm gonna tackle the parks in the city, because I do want to have plenty of places where you can sort of enjoy nature, if you will, even if it's gonna be man-made. But we're in the desert, of course, and if you look at many of the parks in Dubai or Doha, with these large lawns and all of this turf grass, it's extremely unsustainable and expensive and even hard for the upkeep, just because you have to water it. It's really hard to care for grass in this kind of environment. So what I wanted to do with much of the parks actually around here is very similar to the ideas of xeriscape gardening. Keep them as low as for the upkeep and watering as I can. So I'll be filling most of them in with a lot of sand and a lot of gravel instead of having grass in them, and keeping most of the foliage quite deserty and like shrubs of flowers instead of neatly arranging a lot of trees and hedges. Just because it's way easier for the upkeep, it's more sustainable, and it feels like a better option in general, as I would feel extremely bad building a city where I'd say it's sustainable and build it full of parks. Because frankly, as beautiful and green as it may look, it's actually not that great for nature to do that in the middle of a desert. So this is what I'll be hopefully doing around the city, and the same goes for some like larger natured places which I want to have around these city areas. They'll all be mostly rocky, gravelly, sandy, with lots of large bushes. So that's that basically. Getting back to the shopping center which I built over here, it's just the in-game shopping center with a couple of other buildings sort of intersecting over there to kind of get the shape of the shopping center which I was looking for, and the cinema on the corner there, which I stole from Berlin, but it's a beautiful cinema, so I wanted to take that in there. And that pretty much finishes up the shopping center. It's pretty simple, it's not too large, but it felt like the best way to fill in this open spot, and you know, it's so close to the station, it's right at the center of the city. It does feel like a better way to have it than somewhere outside the city perimeter alongside the highway as you would normally see it. So yeah, that's that. And the next thing that I wanted to do around here is do a bunch of detailing alongside the bus. I still had this empty strip between the shopping center and the avenue around here, and I wanted to fill in part of it with a bus stop, just for anybody who wants to go to the shopping center. It's quite close to the bus stop of the central station, but that's on the other side of the train tracks, and especially for pedestrians, and since the bus route is coming alongside the shopping center here anyway, I wanted to put a bus stop over here as well, make that quite fancy with like the custom bus stop prop there, and put a bunch of parks alongside it, because this is basically going to be the edge of what is the central island in the city. On the other side of the avenue you can already see the quay, and there's gonna be a waterfront, which I was kind of hoping I could do more with, but unfortunately I couldn't really figure out how to get buildings and like nice pedestrian places alongside every waterfront, so I just ended up having this avenue alongside the water here, which is not perfect, but it's not going to be too bad, I hope. And it's gonna give a pretty good view for the shopping center and the center of the city here. But we'll have to see all about how that's gonna work out in the future. I'm not really sure either. There's just gonna be a canal around here. That's basically how it's gonna work. And here I'm just filling in the small parks. I was placing a couple of trees outside of them, since sometimes you want to get that like specific size of tree. So what I usually do is actually place a couple ones until you get like the right size of tree, which doesn't go into any other tree or doesn't hang over the path, but fits right neatly into what you're looking for, which is not the perfect solution. And I was wondering if there's a better way to do that kind of thing. At least at the moment I don't think so, but it's one way to fill in trees exactly in the way that you're looking for, without having to worry about like random sizes and random rotations too much. So the last thing that I wanted to do is finish off this very unfinished corner of the city. There were a bunch of buildings that still needed to be built over here, and also there is a small area, a small waterfront here, which is going to be in the future a tiny marina, which I want to kind of have sprawled throughout the entire city. And yeah, this is sort of just something that I had to get back to at the end of this episode. I just wanted to do this so that the entire central island is finished by the time that we're done with this episode, and I can move on into the future without having to worry about like some unfinished areas that I left behind. Also, it works a bit better for like all of the cinematics that I already want to record. So this is really just kind of finishing off this stuff in a very similar way to what I already built before this. Much of it is already kind of filling in the areas between the buildings, because to be quite honest, like the very public and more open spaces between these buildings are really the roads that go around the sides of these blocks. But within these blocks, kind of in a very European kind of way, there's going to be all of the parks and the playgrounds and the places where the actual people that live there can stay, which I want to talk about for a little bit. I got a few comments about this city in general being very European, which I suppose I talked a little bit about as well, kind of touched upon it, but didn't really come back to it much. And yeah, I would say that this city actually does feel very European in the way that it's laid out. A bit American, I guess, in the grid style as well, but definitely like modern Dutch planned cities have this kind of city center layout as well, and it's just much more European than anything that's related to the Gulf area. The thing about it though is that this is not supposed to be a realistic Gulf area city. If it were, I'd probably just be recreating Dubai or Doha and leave it at that. But it's actually more of like fantasy plan about how I would see that Gulf cities could be built, or should be built, maybe, if they would be better cities to live in. So it's not as much a project where I'm trying to create something really realistic, but more kind of an idealistic thing almost, where I'm trying to create the perfect city. Which there's no way that you can create the perfect city, but that's much more close to what I'm trying to do here. It's basically a kind of a prototype of what I think Gulf cities should look like, if they would be cities that I would love to live in and think would be just nice places in general. And the fact that it looks a bit European and not so golf area-ish is probably a result of that, and the fact that I'm just European. I'm probably not going to be able to like get rid of every trace of the way that I think cities work. But really that's just the reason. I think many of these cities like Dubai and Doha, even though they're such modern, bland cities, they still cling to these like 60s ideals of very car-centric layouts. And that's the one thing that I wanted to fix most with the city, and actually make a city that's at least somewhat walkable as much as it can be in this kind of area, and focus on public transport and on making pedestrian-friendly areas as well, and just in general kind of making a city where I would think, yeah, I would kind of like to live there. So really that's just the plan. It's not as much focused on realism, it's also not as much focused on the skyline of the city or the look of it. It's really just focused on, really I would say almost the social dimension of how it would be to live there. So yeah, that's really just what I wanted to say about that. And for me, sustainability also plays a role in it, just because more and more people are gonna live in cities. And I think it's just really interesting to think about how you can make cities more sustainable for not just nature, but also the people that live in it. And I think it's a good time to also start thinking about how we can make cities better. And a game, which is pretty much just a sandbox to go loose with your wildest fantasies about city building, feels like just about the perfect place in which you can do so. And City Skylines is definitely the first game in which you can do that with this amount of control. So that's really what's been motivating me. Anyway, to get back on topic very quickly, this is the Marina Area. Instead of using a key here, I actually figured let's go back to a workshop asset, because there is only a straight section and a curve that sort of curves the inside, so I wouldn't have any issues with like curves that aren't as smooth as the key curves. And it's just a little bit nicer because it also comes with some benches and some planters and a nice brick texture on the side, so hopefully that can be turned into a pretty fancy marina at some point in the future. It's not going to be a very big marina. I also do want to have a couple of those in the future. But especially right now in many of these golf cities, marinas are sprawled throughout the cities and quite a big thing. And this is the only one that the central island is gonna have, so I better turn it into something that's worthwhile. Also, a very quick note, you can still see all of the cars using the pedestrian paths, which is annoying for a couple of reasons. They shouldn't be there in the first place, but also they're kind of going through everything, riding over the basketball courts and riding through trees and stuff like that, which is annoying as hell. I hope to fix that in the future. I actually got Traffic Manager President Edition instead of the one which I had before, which was Traffic Manager plus AI. And with that you can actually block certain vehicles from going on certain roads. I just haven't done it yet because it's gonna take a lot of work. And right now I'd rather just focus on the way that the city looks and just take some boring time off in which I'm otherwise not doing anything to fix the cars going over roads. But I'm super annoyed by it as well, just wanted to say that, and I'm looking into fixing it in the future. It's just sort of something to stick up with right now as the city, or at least the central island isn't completely finished, but it's something to work on, definitely. Anyway, that is just about it for this time-lapse. The central island of the city is pretty much finished at this point. I might come back to it at some point in the future and do some finishing touches, maybe come back to some things that I end up not liking as much as I initially thought. You know, it's really hard to say when something is really finished. But this is finished to the point where I feel safe moving on to other areas and start laying out the rest of the city. So that's what we're gonna do in the next episode. I'm not sure which part I want to tackle yet, but we're gonna get into the other islands and some of the, I would call it almost suburbs of the city, at least not the complete central island, and see how we're gonna make those. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys next time.